Tell me if this sounds familiar. You open your eyes in the morning and immediately an endless drone of thoughts run through your mind. Your brain seems to fill with negativity. The things you dread doing today, reasons to worry and be anxious, all seem to flood into your mind out of nowhere. The voices get louder and louder and you reach for something to distract you, something to silence the noise. For me, it's my phone. Same for most people, I think. In fact, most of the time we're so used to immediately distracting ourselves in the morning that we don't even notice we're doing it. So why do our brains get stuck worrying and overthinking to the point where we feel a compulsive need to distract ourselves? And how do we fix it? Well, don't worry, I got you. In the wise words of Master Yoda,
you must unlearn what you have learned.
I spent years of my life being paralyzed by indecision. I was so afraid of making the wrong choices in life that I made as few choices as possible. I would worry and procrastinate and eventually do my best to convince myself that it didn't matter that I hadn't done the things that scared me because I didn't really want them all that badly anyway.
I should have used the other milk.
But what if it didn't have to be this way? What if we only got more excited and enthusiastic about things the longer we thought about them, instead of getting worn out and discouraged? What if we could transform negativity and procrastination into motivation? Well, the good news is we can. First, we need to understand why we feel this way. To start off, we're going to talk about what I call the 3 stages of overthinking. The first step is worrying. Our minds start to come up with everything that could go wrong. We start to imagine worst-case scenarios, fixate on why we shouldn't do whatever we're considering, or why something isn't right for us, why it'll go badly. And the second step of overthinking is procrastination. Once we've worried so much, we'll tell ourselves we need more time to make a decision, we need more information, but oftentimes we're already fixated on negatives, so we'll just find more reasons that things could go wrong. Thirdly, procrastination progresses into apathy, rationalization, and paralysis. We start to feel so sick of worrying and overthinking that we decide it's just not worth the stress, and we give up. It's not for us, we'll tell ourselves. That's not the kind of person we are. Besides, we didn't really want it all that badly anyway. It's really better off this way. These thought processes often present themselves as virtues. When we're worrying, we tell ourselves we're avoiding dangerous situations and making sure we make the right decisions. By procrastinating, we're making sure that we're ready, we're waiting for the right time, we're researching and learning more. And when we become apathetic or paralyzed, we tell ourselves that it likely would have never worked out anyway, and it's really just a better use of our time to focus on something else. Forget about it. It's also possible to jump straight to rationalizing. For instance, you could see an opportunity you'd like to take, maybe you talk to an attractive person or ask for a raise, and then you immediately jump to rationalizing to yourself why you shouldn't do it. We often do this so quickly we don't even notice opportunities. This process is what causes us to see opportunities as risks, solutions as problems, and to remain firmly entrenched in our comfort zones no matter how much we may dislike them. So what the hell, right? Why do our brains do this to us? It all comes down to something called your ego. As Andrew Leadham puts it in his book, Unstoppable Self-Confidence, this is the negative voice in your head that you think is you, that throws all kinds of negative, undermining, limiting, toxic, damaging thoughts and feelings at you all day long. Every time you say to yourself, you're not good enough, you can't do that, good things like that never happen to you, you're not the kind of person that great things happen to, and 1,000 other things like it, it's not really you, it's your ego. You have a little terrorist running your mind and fighting against you in a battle that you didn't even know you were fighting. The ego's goal is essentially to keep you where you are. The ego sees unfamiliar things as potentially deadly, and it only knows that, well, you've survived this far by being in these familiar patterns, so no matter how much you might dislike them, your ego will do everything it can to keep you there because it thinks that's where you're safe. The ego thinks anything outside of your comfort zone is extremely dangerous, and your ego will gladly use overthinking as a way to keep you paralyzed. And worst of all, the ego then doubles down and goes for the death blow. That little part of you that still hopes and dreams of being the ideal version of yourself. The ego will use all of those times you worried, procrastinated, became apathetic, and gave up, or were too paralyzed by fear and indecision. It'll use those against you. It'll tell you that those are the reasons that it is right about you, that you really are too weak, you really aren't cut out for the dream life, you really should just stay where you are. In essence, the ego convinces you to not try, and then uses the fact that you didn't try as a reason why you should never try at all, ever. If you only take one thing away from this video, make it this: your ego is wrong. Simply being aware of this voice has transformed my perspective on life. I used to constantly throw toxicity into my own path. I told myself I wasn't good enough, I wasn't ready, I didn't know enough, I wasn't ever going to be good enough, I couldn't do the things I dreamed of because I didn't know how. I just wasn't cut out for it. I wanted to start making travel YouTube videos 5 years ago, but my ego told me I wasn't good enough in front of a camera. I wasn't attractive enough for people to watch me. I couldn't cope with the stresses of travel. The best option was just to wait, right? Wait till I felt ready. Here's the truth. It'll never happen. You will never feel completely prepared. Your ego ego will always find another area that you could improve, another way to procrastinate, to buy more time where it'll convince you that you're being productive. Just learn more, just practice a little bit more, or just wait. Our ego floods our minds with indecision and then does its best to drown us in it. But here's what we can do about it. Here's how we can change that worry, that frustration, that paralysis into momentum, action, and motivation. The first step is to imagine the best case scenario instead of everything that could go wrong. Remember when you were a little kid and you daydream about how amazing things would be in life? You'd imagine all the things you could do, all the things that could go right, instead of allowing your ego to tell you an ever-increasing list of things that could go wrong. Try and notice if you had a gut reaction to that also that said, that's not realistic, that's not how the world works. And notice that that is your ego trying to sabotage you in real time, telling you that negative thinking is realistic and positive thinking is childish. This is where the initial divergence happens, the fork in the mental road. This is where you can either turn an opportunity into a way forwards towards your goals and dream life, or another tally in your ego's list of reasons that you aren't cut out for that life. Another weapon for your ego to use to beat the shit out of you to keep you where it wants you. The second step is action, which is the opposite of procrastination. In an alternative timeline, you might have waited and procrastinated making a decision, but now, having thought about the positive sides as well as some of the negatives, you're poised to make a decision, to either say yes or no and move forward. On the other side of the spectrum, you'd still be avoiding making a decision. You'd be thinking about it still, but procrastinating any actual action. And finally, the best part is that instead of leading to a state of apathy and paralysis, now you lead yourself to a state of momentum and motivation, where in the past you would have just handed your ego a new piece of ammunition to use against you. Instead, you've given yourself a weapon against your ego. You've proved that your ego was wrong. You are the kind of person who does scary things and moves towards their goals in life. Regardless of the outcome, simply taking action to push yourself outside of your comfort zone and closer towards what you want in life proves that you are the type of person who does things that are scary and challenging. You start to calm your mind. You begin to build momentum because each consecutive action step builds more and more evidence that you are the person you prefer to be rather than the person your ego says you are. In the same way that focusing on negatives feeds the voice that says to stay small and fear new things, focusing on positives and taking action steps outside of your comfort zone feeds the voice that says you can do the things you want. In his book Atomic Habits, James Clear writes, "Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. The beauty is that you win by acting, not by succeeding. The more actions you take that move you closer to the life you want, in essence, the more you are voting for yourself to be that type of person. Every time you consciously overcome your ego, you start a positive feedback loop that builds more and more momentum that helps you overcome your ego again in the future." Many people are familiar with the story of an elephant that was tied to a post with a thin rope as a baby and now, fully grown, believes that when the rope is tied to it, there's no way for it to move. Elephants trained this way have been programmed to think they are less powerful than they actually are. Here's the crazy part though. We are all the elephant in our own lives, except we have even more potential and thumbs. We shoot down options without considering them. We allow our egos to tell us we're small and insignificant and don't have what it takes. And we allow negative thinking, fear, and apathy to keep us trapped in boxes that only exist in our own heads. Steve Jobs once said, "Everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it. You can influence it. Once you learn that, you will never be the same again." So the next time you find yourself stuck in a pattern of overthinking or your ego tells you you're not good enough, ask yourself this: what's the best case scenario? What would happen if you took action and got the outcome you desired? What would happen if you chose to be brave and decisive and to see potential failure as a learning opportunity instead of something to be feared? What would happen if you didn't listen to your ego? What would happen if you broke the rope?